Greetings, good morning, and welcome. I'm Sara Flounders, and I'll be moderating today's discussion, International Manifesto Group membership discussion. And it's an honor to be here. Usually, Radhika Desai is here, a wonderful chair of discussions and webinars. Radhika is traveling, and we do miss her. So I'll be trying to fill in on this discussion. Our topic is the United States midterm election, oligarchy versus oligarchy. Now, we're meeting at a time when even the slightest shred of hope or expectation that some folks still held that there would be a determined anti-war voice anywhere in the Congress that had carried any weight at all would emerge, and that has been absolutely dashed. It's all but collapsed. We saw the 30 members of the Progressive Caucus who had sent Biden a weak, really unsubstantial letter that made clear their support for the Ukraine, for the US war, but mildly encouraged negotiation. Even that letter had to be retracted, literally publicly retracted. What a humiliating thing to do. So it really means the collapse of any anti-war forces within the US Congress. And all of these who, by the way, signed the letter just with a mild suggestion of negotiations had voted every appropriation for this war to be carried out. So this is the situation we face today. Even folks who thought they were electing voices that would represent them in Congress are being completely, well, the mask is off. The very name of today's panel, I think, does show in advance where International Manifesto is coming from, oligarchy versus oligarchy. And certainly in US politics, the Democratic and Republican Party are a two-headed monster, a monster totally committed to protecting US imperialism's position in the world, its corporate ownership, an economy built on militarism. So let me turn this opening over to Margaret Kimberley, who is the senior editor of Black Agenda Report, a leader of the Black Alliance for Peace, and on the administrative committee of the United National Antiwar Coalition. She's the author of Presidential, which is really one of the best exposés you would see popularly, spanning a couple hundred years of US history. And just again and again, the corruption, the alliances, the racism that is so deeply embedded in this system. So Margaret, let me call you forth.
All right.
Opening discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sara. Good morning. And I'm going to give a special good morning to some of you on the West Coast. We're 3 hours ahead. Kudos to you all. Greetings, everyone. I'm Margaret Kimberley, and I'm in New York City. And thanks so much for joining this discussion about the midterm elections in the United States, which will take place next week on Tuesday, November 8th. For those of you who may not know, they're called midterms because they take place in the middle of the 4-year presidential term. All members of the House of Representatives are running for office, as well as 1/3 of the members of the Senate. And the election will determine if Joe Biden keeps his slim majority or will lose it to the Republicans, which would be what we refer to as divided government. I know in many countries there's no such thing, that you vote for, that you have a different system, and the head of state will govern along with his party, but that's not true here. It wouldn't be the first time. Biden could end up with the Congress that belongs to the opposition party. But what is opposition in the United States? What does that mean in a country that is in fact ruled by an oligarchy. Anyone who pays attention knows that we seldom get what we need and want from our political system. An often quoted study from 2014 proved that we aren't imagining things when we say there's little difference. Two professors, one from Princeton University and the other from Northwestern University, looked at opinion surveys taken from the 1960s through the early 2000s and concluded that they showed what people want compared to what the political system actually produces. And their finding was, quote, economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on US government policy, while average citizens and mass-based interest groups have little or no independent influence. They conclude our analyses suggest that majorities of the American public actually have little influence over the policies our government adopts. And they added, policymaking is dominated by powerful business organizations and a small number of affluent Americans. America's claims to being a democratic society are seriously threatened, unquote. They found that even groups thought of as being powerful, such as labor unions and civil rights organizations, who are often referred to as special interest groups, have little impact in getting what low and middle income people want through the electoral process. I'm going to share with you an internet meme, and I'm so bad at sharing, but let's see, drum roll, it's just very quick. Let's see. Hold on. There you go. I hope you can see it. And it's just a map. This was a meme I saw 2 years ago, the 2020 presidential election. And you always see these maps, and they show how many electoral votes each state has. But you'll see in this, I hope you can see that it shows that it's all purple, and purple is the oligarchy. So the oligarchy wins every state, every time. And that's it. So I just thought that was amusing. So instead of showing the states that were won by Biden or Trump, it shows that the oligarchy, like the house at a casino, always wins. And our talk is called Oligarchy versus Oligarchy for a good reason. It has different wings, of course, and there are boogeymen created by each side, such as the Koch brothers, billionaires. I think one has passed away. Now it's just the Koch brother, I guess, who play a large role in conservative politics, while big tech are usually represented by Democrats, as an example. But these differences don't matter that much when we see that Bill Clinton, who was thought of as a liberal, took from the poor and gave to the rich. His so-called welfare reform worsened poverty, but he did away with regulations of the financial services sector and made rich people richer. He was followed by a Republican, George W. Bush, who passed a large tax cut for upper income people. The tax cut was supposed to be temporary, but the next president, Barack Obama, a Democrat, did nothing to end it. He was followed by Republican Donald Trump, who passed an even bigger tax cut for the wealthy. Rich people did well no matter who was in office. Now, they all know what people want. So the rhetoric is quite different from what we get. So Obama said that we would have a new healthcare system that covered everyone, but Obamacare, which is what it was popularly known as, didn't do that. His plan enshrined corporate control over healthcare and was essentially a bailout of big pharma and the health insurance companies. So this 2014 study pretty much tells us what we already knew if we paid attention. During the last presidential election in 2020, we heard from some of the oligarch representatives just that. The CEO of Boeing, which is one of the biggest defense contractors, said, quote, "I think both candidates at my appear globally oriented and interested in our country. And I believe they'll support the industries. I don't think we're going to take a position on one being better than the other," unquote. And I love that he said that. I love when they say the quiet part out loud. In this case, that the military industrial complex will do just fine, while we are told that every election will determine whether good or evil. The people who are good for their crowd are also seen as equally good to the people who run things. And I want to add about the defense contractors. If you go to Washington, D.C., you will actually see advertisements for Boeing or Raytheon or McDonnell Douglas in the metro system and on the street. That's interesting to me because I'm not sure who they're advertising to. I can't order a new system, but I guess I can get a subliminal message that they run the show, and I better just accept it without complaint. And that's why the military industrial complex has so far received roughly $60 billion that we are told is for Ukraine. My number may be wrong, but it's a huge amount of money. Now these weapon systems do end up in Ukraine, and most of that money goes to the defense contractors. And the project is thoroughly bipartisan, with Democrats and Republicans alike voting for these endless allocations. We've seen, and Sara mentioned, the hypocrisy of some of these people in Congress in a sorry and sad display in the last week or so. And here's a little background. They're a group of people who belong to the LaRouche Party, a right-wing party, but they've been publicly confronting members of Congress who claim to be on the left, who are popularly known as progressives. And these so-called progressives play an important role in protecting this charade of the duopoly that I've been talking about here. They know they're people who want Medicare for all and a higher minimum wage, so they campaign for office in certain districts where they know they will get those votes. But of course, they too answer to the oligarchy. They get into office and say nothing about giving money to the far right, in some cases neo-Nazi Ukrainian government. Or they will claim to have misgivings but vote for the money anyway. So they were being confronted by these LaRouche members, and in order to cover themselves, because they say what you will about these people and their party, they inspired others. So in order to cover themselves and avoid answering good questions, these progressives wrote this letter to Biden. In the letter, they backed him to the hilt on Ukraine, praised him for sending billions of dollars, called Vladimir Putin evil and the Ukrainians angels, but then said they wanted to see negotiations with Russia. The letter was awkward and dishonest fence straddling, but it didn't even last 24 hours. After receiving pushback from the White House and their own congressional leadership, the next day they officially withdrew the letter and humiliated themselves and their colleagues. Because the US is an oligarchy, we have dishonest politicians who cave into powerful interests because, frankly, that is their real job, doing the business of the powerful while marketing themselves as representatives of the people. The military-industrial complex, which has no concerns about who emerges as an electoral winner, has already determined that Ukraine will be a forever war. How could it not be? Afghanistan ended and had to be replaced by another conflict. Polling indicates that Biden and the Democrats will lose control of one or both houses of Congress. But if they lose, it will be because they haven't delivered for the voters. Biden ran for office claiming he would raise the minimum wage, that everyone would receive a $2,000 stimulus payment, which was actually turned out to just be $1,400. Then he touted this Build Back Better bill, which would continue stimulus programs such as the child tax credit, which helped struggling families. But in the end, the greedy oligarchs spoke and declared that they didn't want it to happen, and lo and behold, it didn't. Biden also was pushed into providing some sort of student loan debt relief, and he offered a paltry $10,000 or $20,000, depending on whether the borrower had received federal funding. But in any case, it was totally inadequate. But now a federal judge has ruled against it, and it may not happen at all. Then there was the Inflation Reduction Act, which does nothing to stop inflation, but provides opportunities for more lying, in this case about the pharmaceutical industry. This wing of the oligarchy threw a small bone and will allow the prices of 10 drugs to be negotiated for Medicare recipients. Medicare is a health care program for senior citizens, but they keep forgetting to add that it will be just 10 drugs and not until 2026. But Biden and other Democrats claim that they have beaten Big Pharma. But that's the paradox in this country. They run for office and say what people want to hear, but they get in and don't do what they say they are going to do. And Donald Trump is no different, I hasten to add. He campaigned saying he would represent the needs of working people, but all he did was give their bosses a big tax cut. Biden told us when he was overheard at a fundraiser, and that's who goes to fundraisers, the oligarchs, people with a lot of money. And he said he was heard to say, nothing will fundamentally change. That is the promise that he and the rest will always keep. We have elections. There will be elections for offices across the country on November 8th, but what we won't get is the change that we need. So I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak on this issue, which is largely forbidden in US discourse. And the truth is not allowed to be spoken. If people knew that their affinity for certain politicians or party was a sham, they just might decide to stop going along with this pernicious program. So I thank you very much for starting this conversation. Thank you.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.